The dimly lit room hummed with laughter and chatter, the sound of glasses clinking together, and the occasional burst of laughter that echoed through the small gathering. It was a typical Saturday night, nothing special, just another get-together among friends who had known each other for years. The air was thick with casual conversation, but there was one thing that made tonight different: the piano. In the corner of the room sat a piano, its wood worn, chipped, and scratched. The keys were uneven, a few of them had deep scars where they had been struck too many times, and a couple were missing entirely. It was a sad sight, sitting abandoned in that corner, as if it had been forgotten by time and use. And yet, there it was, drawing everyone's attention because of one simple reason: someone had dared her to play. Her name was Claire, a newcomer to the group, and she was more of an enigma than anything else. She had moved into town recently, quiet and reserved, always blending into the background. While everyone else was loud, lively, and sometimes even outrageous, Claire never seemed to make much of a splash. She didn't have a knack for cracking jokes, nor did she dominate the conversations. She wasn't the life of the party, but she wasn't a wallflower either. She was just there. And then, there was the dare. It started as a joke, of course. One of the friends had casually mentioned that the piano was in desperate need of someone who could play it. No one had dared to try, mainly because no one thought it would be worth the effort. It wasn't that they didn't think Claire could play, it was just that they didn't think anyone could play that sad, broken piano. It was more of a prop, an oddity in the room, and no one had ever seriously considered trying to make it sing again. "Go on, Claire," Maria had said, a mischievous smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I dare you to play something on that thing. If you can make it sound even remotely decent, I'll buy you a drink." It was a light-hearted joke. No one thought for a second that Claire would take it seriously. But Claire, in her usual quiet way, had simply nodded, a small smile crossing her face. She didn't laugh or push the idea aside. She simply stood up, walked across the room, and sat down at the piano. Everyone froze, unsure of what to make of it. "Wait, you're actually going to play?" someone asked, still not believing she would follow through. Claire didn't answer. She just took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and let her fingers rest there for a moment. The room went quiet. No one knew what to expect. They all waited for her to make a joke out of it, to hit a wrong note or laugh at herself. But Claire didn't laugh. She didn't stumble. She simply closed her eyes and began to play. The first few notes were soft, almost tentative, like someone trying to feel their way through a dark room. The piano groaned under her fingers, the old strings vibrating uneasily as she struck each key. It sounded off. Very off. But there was something about the way Claire played that made the audience pause. It wasn't bad, it wasn't awful either. It was just different. As she played, the room began to settle into a strange silence. Everyone stopped talking, stopped moving, and just listened. Claire's fingers moved across the keys with surprising grace. The music was simple, almost childlike in its innocence, but there was an undeniable quality to it. It felt like the piano was speaking for her in a way words never could. At first, the guests exchanged confused glances. "Is she serious?" someone whispered, not wanting to break the fragile stillness. But then, something remarkable happened. The melody grew richer, more complex, and the room seemed to take on a different atmosphere. The broken piano, which had been discarded and forgotten, seemed to come alive under Claire's touch. The notes weren't just clunky sounds anymore, they had meaning, a rawness to them that couldn't be ignored. She wasn't just playing notes. She was telling a story. And the people in the room were listening, captivated. Claire's hands moved fluidly now, her fingers catching the right notes with an ease that no one had expected. The music, though soft and haunting, was undeniably beautiful. There was a depth to it that could not be ignored. And yet, the piano was still far from perfect. Some of the keys made harsh, sharp sounds when Claire's fingers brushed against them, but it didn't matter. The mistakes didn't matter because, in that moment, the imperfections added to the rawness of the music. The melody felt like a conversation, one that was at once familiar and new, as if Claire was reaching into something deep inside her that she had never shared with anyone before. Maria, who had dared her to play in the first place, stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape. What is this?" she murmured, barely able to comprehend what she was hearing. Claire didn't answer. She couldn't answer. She just played. The air in the room felt thick now, charged with an energy that was almost tangible. The people who had gathered for a simple night of drinks and laughter now found themselves caught in something far more powerful than they had ever expected. Claire's music was not just a song. It was a window into something hidden, something fragile and beautiful that they had no way of understanding. It wasn't until she reached a particularly high note that the piano finally gave up. One of the strings snapped with a sharp twang, breaking the moment. Claire's fingers faltered for a split second, and the room, for just a breath, held its collective breath. She stopped playing. Her hands hovered over the keys for a moment, still and silent. But instead of finishing with a flourish, Claire just sat there. She didn't look at anyone, didn't smile or make any remark. She didn't even acknowledge the stunned silence that had filled the room. She just stood up, slowly, and walked toward the door. No one moved. No one knew what to say. The music still echoed in their minds, lingering like the aftertaste of something sweet and mysterious. They watched her walk out without a word, the sound of her footsteps fading as she left the room. As the door closed behind her, Maria finally spoke, her voice a low whisper. "Who was that?" she asked, still struggling to understand what had just happened. "Who is she?" The others exchanged confused looks. None of them had any answers. They didn't know who Claire was. She hadn't introduced herself much, never made any real attempt to be noticed. She was simply there. And yet, in that moment, she had shown them a side of herself that no one had expected. No one had even known existed. Someone stood up and walked over to the piano, hesitantly pressing a key. The sound was flat, lifeless, as it had always been. But for a moment, just one brief moment, the room had been alive with something far beyond what they had expected. Claire had played a broken piano like she was speaking the language of something they could never understand. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The room fell back into silence, the music fading from their ears, replaced by the dull hum of the night once again. But something had shifted. There was an air of disbelief lingering, a feeling that they had all witnessed something important, something life-changing, but had no idea what it meant or how to make sense of it. The mystery of Claire, the woman with the broken piano, had just begun. The evening dragged on, but no one could shake the feeling that something extraordinary had happened. The group of friends tried to go back to their usual chatter, but the room felt different now. The hum of conversation was faint, as if everyone's minds were somewhere else, still lingering in the echo of Claire's unexpected performance. Maria stood near the piano, still staring at it. She touched the broken strings, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys, half expecting them to come alive under her touch as they had with Claire. But there was nothing. Just the dead sound of the unplayable piano. She wasn't sure why she had expected it to be any different. "What was that?" someone asked from across the room. It was James, who had been the first to speak up when Claire started playing. His voice held a mix of disbelief and fascination. "Did we just witness something insane, or am I losing it?" "I don't know," Maria replied, her voice trailing off. She could hardly focus. She just sat down and played. It was like she knew the piano better than we do. It was broken, but she made it sound real. It was beautiful. James finished her sentence. "Yeah," Maria nodded, but there was more to it. It was beautiful in a way that doesn't make sense. It's just a broken piano. How could it sound like that? The others in the room nodded, a quiet murmur of agreement echoing their confusion. But no one dared speak too much about it. What could they say? How could they explain what they had just witnessed? Back at her apartment, Claire sat on her couch, her mind far from the party she had just left. She had never been one for attention, and tonight, she had gotten more than she'd ever expected. She could still hear the piano in her head, the notes flowing through her like a current of water. It wasn't just the music that stayed with her. It was the silence, the way the room had grown quiet as everyone watched her play. The way they had all been pulled into something they didn't understand. But it wasn't just about them. It was about her. She had spent her life hiding. Hiding behind the walls she built to protect herself, hiding behind the simple facade of being just another person. But when she sat at that piano, something changed. It was as if the music had given her permission to exist fully, to show a side of herself that no one knew. Not even herself. She had always been good at hiding. But for those few minutes, she let herself be seen. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone. She glanced at the clock, 11:15 p.m. Who would be here this late? She opened the door to find Maria standing on the other side. Maria was holding a bottle of wine, her usual bright smile replaced with an unusual seriousness. Her eyes seemed to hold a question, as if she wasn't sure how to ask what was on her mind. "Hey," Maria said, a bit hesitant. "Can I come in?" Sure," Claire replied, stepping aside to let her in. Maria walked in and set the bottle on the counter, her eyes scanning the modest apartment. It was quiet, far from the boisterous party they'd left behind. The contrast between the two was stark. Maria finally turned to face Claire, her expression still a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. "You never told us you could play," Maria said, her voice low, almost as if she were speaking carefully. "You never told us you were that good." Claire shrugged, glancing at the floor. She didn't know how to respond. She hadn't planned on playing. She hadn't planned on any of this. But Maria's gaze was intense, unrelenting. She clearly wanted an answer. "I don't usually share it," Claire admitted quietly. I don't want people to think it's something to be amazed by. It's just music, you know." "Just music?" Maria repeated, clearly not convinced. "What you did back there wasn't just music, Claire. That was something else. You made that broken piano sound like it was singing. You made it come alive." Claire turned her gaze toward the window, her mind wandering. The streetlights outside cast a dim glow, but her mind wasn't on the street. It was on the room she had just left behind. The people who had witnessed her play. The way their faces had looked, confused and stunned, yet somehow mesmerized. "I don't want to be seen like that," Claire finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want them to see me as some kind of performer or someone to be admired. I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to be a spectacle." Maria took a step closer, her expression softening. "I get it. But you've got to understand something, Claire. You're not a spectacle. What you did was real. You made something broken sound beautiful. And that's rare. That's rare and it matters." Claire shook her head. She wasn't sure she believed her. She had spent her life avoiding attention, trying to be invisible. Music had always been her escape, her way of coping with the world around her. It was never meant to be something she shared. Not like that. But Maria wasn't backing down. "Look, I don't want to push you. I just think you should know that you're not ordinary. What you did wasn't ordinary. It was extraordinary. And maybe you should start letting people see that." Claire didn't respond. She wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't ready for this, for any of this. She had never been ready for the kind of attention that came with being seen. But what Maria had said lingered in her mind. Maybe there was something there. Something hidden in the silence between the notes. The next day, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing. She went about her routine, walking to the market, making her usual stops, but everything felt different. It wasn't just the music, though that still played in the back of her mind. It was the way people looked at her now. The way they didn't just pass by her as if she were invisible. Now they stopped. They smiled. They recognized her. By the time she returned home that afternoon, she had already received 3 text messages asking if she would be performing again. The thought of it made her heart race. Her fingers itched to touch the keys again, but fear clamped down on her. That evening, Maria sent another message. "Hey, there's another party tonight. Do you want to come? I think everyone would love to hear you play again. Just think about it. We're all waiting for you." Claire hesitated. She wanted to say no. She wanted to curl up in her apartment, away from the spotlight. But she knew Maria wouldn't stop pushing. Not this time. So, she decided to go. But not to perform. Just to be there. Just to exist in the background, like she always had. Only this time, it felt impossible. Later that night, the party was in full swing. Laughter echoed through the house, and glasses were being raised in toasts. But as Claire stood in the corner of the room, she couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. Everyone knew her now. And all they wanted was to see her play. Maria caught her eye from across the room and gave her a thumbs up. Claire shook her head, but Maria was already motioning toward the piano, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. She didn't want to. She wasn't ready. But she didn't have a choice. She walked toward the piano, her heart pounding in her chest. The moment she touched the keys, the room fell silent again, just as it had the night before. Only this time, Claire wasn't sure she wanted to be seen. She closed her eyes and played. The broken piano came to life again, this time in a way she hadn't expected. Her fingers moved with more confidence, more purpose. And this time, it wasn't just the room listening. It was Claire herself, listening to the music that she had been hiding for so long. But what was this music trying to say? And why did it feel like the beginning of something far bigger than just a simple song? The quiet hum of the party had barely started again when Claire's fingers hovered above the piano keys. For a split second, she thought about standing up, walking away, and pretending like none of this had ever happened. But something deeper inside her urged her to stay. It wasn't the crowd, it wasn't the attention, but the music itself. Something about it called to her, demanding to be heard. She let her fingers fall onto the piano keys. A hush descended upon the room as she played. It wasn't like the first time. No, this time it was different. Her hands moved across the broken keys with a sense of familiarity, as though the piano had always been an extension of her, as though it had always known what to do when she touched it. The music she created was hauntingly beautiful, fragile yet powerful, and everyone in the room seemed to hold their breath in the presence of it. Claire closed her eyes as the notes filled the space. She felt herself sinking deeper into the melody, letting it wash over her. She wasn't performing for anyone anymore. She wasn't even in the room anymore. She was lost in the music, lost in the way the notes felt under her fingertips, the way they resonated in her chest. But as the last note faded into the night, a strange feeling settled in her stomach. There was something off. A slight shift in the air. The room was still silent, and Claire opened her eyes, glancing up. For a moment, she thought she had imagined it, but then she saw them. People were looking at her differently. Their faces weren't just filled with amazement now. There was something else. Something deeper. Suspicion. Maria was the first to break the silence, stepping forward with a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "That was incredible," she said, her voice a little too cheerful. Claire nodded, her heartbeat quickening. Something was wrong. She could feel it, but she couldn't quite put it into words. She rose from the piano slowly, trying to keep her composure, but her hands trembled slightly. She needed to get out of there. To clear her head. As she turned to leave, James stepped in front of her, blocking her way. His face was serious, his usual relaxed demeanor gone. "Hey, Claire, you okay?" She didn't want to look at him. She didn't want to talk. But she forced herself to meet his gaze. "I'm fine," she said, trying to sound as normal as possible. I need some air." James hesitated for a moment before nodding. Sure. But listen, Claire, we all know you didn't just play a broken piano, right?" Claire's heart skipped a beat. Her body froze for a second, and then she forced herself to smile, though it didn't feel real. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," James said, leaning in slightly. "That piano, it was broken. You shouldn't have been able to make it sound like that. It's impossible, Claire. You didn't just play it, you made it sing. And I think you know that." Claire's stomach twisted. The last thing she wanted was for someone to start digging into this. She had already played it off as a joke, a mistake. She had tried to ignore the truth, the way the music had come alive in a way she hadn't expected. But now, hearing it out loud, it sounded so much more real. And the thought terrified her. "I don't know what you're talking about," Claire said, trying to sound casual. "It's just music. Anyone could do it if they know what they're doing." But James wasn't buying it. "You're lying. And I think we both know it. Something's going on, Claire. I don't know what, but I need to know. We all need to know." Before she could respond, Maria stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "James, maybe we should just let it go. She's not going to talk about it if she doesn't want to." "No," James said, shaking his head. "This isn't just about her not wanting to talk. There's something more here. Something strange. And it's affecting all of us." Claire's mind raced. She couldn't let this go on. She had to shut it down before it went too far. She had to get away from all of this before it consumed her, before people started digging too deep. "I need to go," Claire said abruptly, her voice shaky now. "Please, just let me go." But Maria caught her arm before she could escape. "Claire, please, don't run away from this. You can't just hide forever." Claire yanked her arm back, the words coming out more forcefully than she intended. "I'm not hiding. I just don't want anyone to know. I don't want anyone to see me like that. It's not real." But even as she said it, she knew the words were hollow. She didn't know what was real anymore. The music had felt real. The way she had played had felt real. But the moment she opened her eyes and saw everyone staring at her, it was like the world had shifted on its axis. James stepped closer, his expression softer now. "Claire, listen. I'm not trying to force you into anything. But something happened tonight. And I think we all know it." Claire shook her head, desperate to hold on to the last bit of control she had left. "I don't know what you want from me, James. I just need time to think. Okay? Can we just forget about it?" Maria exchanged a glance with James, but neither of them pushed further. For a moment, Claire thought she could escape this, that she could walk away and leave the confusion behind. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something she wasn't prepared for. The next morning, Claire woke up with the same unease gnawing at her. She couldn't remember the last time she had gotten a good night's sleep. The images of the party, the piano, and the strange way everyone had looked at her played over and over in her mind. The doubt, the suspicion, the way they had all seemed to sense that there was something more. She forced herself out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen, trying to clear her head. Her phone buzzed on the counter, and she sighed before picking it up. It was a message from Maria. "Hey, Claire. Just checking in. I know last night was a lot, but, please, let me know when you're ready to talk. We're all here for you." Claire's heart sank. She didn't want to talk. She didn't want anyone to know the truth. Not yet. Not until she understood what was happening. But that wasn't the worst of it. As she scrolled through the rest of her messages, one caught her attention, a text from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but I know what you did. Don't pretend it's nothing. You can't hide forever. I'll be in touch." Her blood ran cold as she stared at the message. This wasn't just about a broken piano anymore. Someone knew. Someone had figured out that the music wasn't just music. And they weren't going to stop until they uncovered the truth. The day stretched on in a blur. Claire couldn't focus on anything. Every sound, every person she came into contact with, seemed to remind her of what had happened. She had tried to block it out, but it was impossible now. The truth was creeping closer, and it was terrifying. She didn't know who to trust anymore. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned an ominous shade of gray, Claire sat on her couch, lost in thought. She could feel the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. The piano was still in the back of her mind. The way it had come alive. The way the music had wrapped itself around her like a cocoon. And now, the text. The warning. It was clear that someone knew more than she was willing to admit. Someone knew what she had done. And if she didn't figure this out soon, it wouldn't just be the piano that came crashing down. Claire sat alone in her living room, the weight of the world pressing down on her chest. The text from the unknown number still burned in her mind. It was the moment everything changed. There was no escaping it anymore, no way to deny that something deep and untouchable had been awakened. And it wasn't just about the piano anymore. The truth had been slowly creeping up on her, and now, it was unavoidable. The strange thing was, she had known all along. From the moment she sat at that piano, something had felt different. The way her fingers had moved without thinking. The way the music had flowed effortlessly, as though it had always been there, waiting for her to discover it. But what had it been? Was it a gift? A curse? Her phone buzzed again, another message from Maria. "Claire, we're all worried. Please talk to us. What happened that night? What's going on?" Claire bit her lip, staring at the message. She had avoided talking to everyone, especially Maria and James. They were persistent, but she couldn't bring herself to explain. How could she tell them? How could she explain the unexplainable? She didn't have an answer. She didn't know what it was, but she had to find out. She had to face whatever was waiting for her, whatever truth she was running from. She couldn't keep running. Her thoughts were interrupted by another buzz, this time from an unknown number. She hesitated, her heart racing. But there was no escaping it. She opened the message. "You're not alone. I've been watching. You know who I am. It's time to face what you've done. You're not the only one with this gift. And you won't be the last." A cold shiver ran down Claire's spine. Her mind raced. What gift? Before she could respond, her phone rang. It was Maria. "Claire?" Maria's voice sounded strained. "Are you okay? You haven't answered my messages." Claire's voice felt trapped in her throat. She knew Maria was worried, but it felt like the walls were closing in around her. "Maria, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what to do." There was a brief silence on the other end, then Maria spoke gently. "We need to talk. Please, Claire. Whatever this is, you don't have to go through it alone. We're here for you." Claire closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The words felt like a lifeline, but the weight of the truth was too heavy to share. I don't know if I can explain it, Maria. It's not just the piano. It's something more. Maria's voice softened, full of understanding. You don't have to explain it all at once. Just tell me what's going on. We'll figure it out together. Claire felt the tears welling up in her eyes. I don't even understand it, Maria. The music, it's like it wasn't me playing it. Like something else was guiding me. And now, someone's threatening me. They know what happened. There was a long pause. Maria's voice became steady. Claire, listen to me. You are not alone in this. You may not understand it yet, but you're not the only one. Someone else knows about this gift, and they've been watching you. I know it's scary, but you can't face it alone. The words, "not the only one," echoed in Claire's mind. She sat up straight, the pieces of the puzzle slowly starting to fit together. She wasn't the only one. Who else had this ability? What did it mean? And why had it awakened in her? I don't know who to trust anymore, Claire whispered. I don't even trust myself. Maria's voice softened further. You need to trust someone. Trust me. I'm here. Whatever this is, we'll figure it out. But you have to be honest with yourself first. You're not just running from the truth about the piano. You're running from what you've always known about yourself. The music, it's always been a part of you. And now it's speaking to you. Don't shut it out. Claire shook her head, as if trying to physically push away the thoughts. I don't want this. I never asked for it. I just want to be normal. I just want to be me. You are normal, Claire, Maria said firmly. You've always been you. This is just another part of who you are, even if it scares you. You have a gift. And it's okay to have it. You don't have to hide it anymore. Claire wiped her eyes, the weight of Maria's words sinking in. The fear she had felt for so long, the fear of being different, of being watched, of not understanding, was finally being replaced by something else. Something that felt like acceptance. It wasn't easy. But maybe Maria was right. Maybe it was time to stop running. Okay, Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. I'll talk to you. But I need to know more. About this gift. About everything. Later that night, Claire met Maria and James at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. The atmosphere was calm, almost too calm for what they needed to talk about. James was sitting at a corner table, his eyes scanning the room nervously, while Maria sat across from him, her gaze fixed on Claire. Claire sat down slowly, taking in the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was her life. Her reality. Her truth. Claire, James said, his voice steady but filled with concern. You know we're just trying to help, right? This, whatever happened with that piano, it's not just about you. We've all been talking. And we think it's time to figure out what's really going on. Claire looked down at her hands, not wanting to meet their eyes. She could feel the walls she had built around herself beginning to crack. The truth was coming, whether she was ready for it or not. I don't know what it is, Claire said softly, her voice shaky. But it feels like it's been inside me for as long as I can remember. The music, it's like it was always there, just waiting for me to notice it. James leaned forward, his gaze intense. It's not just about the music, Claire. It's about what you can do with it. There's more to it. We've been looking into it. And, we think there's someone else out there with the same ability. Claire's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Someone else? Maria nodded. We don't know who. But someone's been watching you. You're not the only one. This gift, it's bigger than we thought. And you need to understand what it means before it's too late. Before what's too late? Claire asked, panic rising in her chest. James sighed, looking over at Maria before answering. Before someone uses it against you. Before you lose control of it. Claire swallowed hard. The room seemed to spin, the weight of their words sinking in. Someone else. Someone who knew. Someone who could use this against her. Suddenly, a voice broke into their conversation. It was low and unfamiliar, but it carried a sense of danger. "You've figured it out then?" Claire's eyes widened as she turned toward the voice. A tall figure stood in the doorway of the cafe, their face hidden by the shadows. "Who are you?" Claire asked, her voice shaking with fear. The figure stepped into the light, and Claire's breath caught in her throat. It was a man, but there was something otherworldly about him. His eyes were too intense, too knowing. And when he spoke again, his voice was smooth, yet full of an undeniable power. "You don't need to know my name," the man said coldly. "But I'm here to take what's mine." James and Maria stood up, but the man raised a hand, silencing them. His gaze locked on Claire, and she felt a chill run through her. "You've awakened something that wasn't meant to be awakened. And now, you're going to regret it." The man's words echoed in Claire's mind, sending a shock of fear through her body. She realized, in that moment, that the truth she had been avoiding was finally catching up to her. The music, the gift, it wasn't something she could control. Not yet. But now, it seemed that someone else had learned the truth, too. And they were coming for her.